Let's take a brief look at passwords. First of all, the system is capable of having a password, and that has several reasons. First would be if it's an individual user and they do not want anybody else using their system while they're out of the house, you can set up a password. Then there is the major reason, which is at gun clubs, where it's imperative that the gun club owner has password protection on his system so that he can control the use of it. So those are the two reasons. And then once in a while, we find someone who accidentally turns on the passwords and then doesn't quite know what to do about it. So I'll try and cover all of those things in this short video. We're going to start by going to Setup on the menu bar, and then we're going to click on System Configuration. And in System Configuration, you're going to want to go to the Advanced tab. And now looking at this Advanced dialog box, up here in the upper left, there is one called Enable Shooter Passwords. And if you click on that, and then come down and click on OK, your passwords are now set. And this is where some people accidentally get the password set and can't understand what has happened to them. So when I click OK right now, from this point on, the passwords are effectively turned on. And for instance, if I were to go to the configuration settings screen again, you're going to be blocked unless you have the password. And of course, this is part of the protection because the configuration settings screen is the main dialog box that sets up everything in your system. So the password that DryFire comes with then is the word DryFire in lower letters, lowercase letters, DRYFIRE. And if you click OK, notice that now having the password set, and the first time I tried to go to system configuration, I had to enter the password, which starts out as DryFire. And so now I'm in and I can do what I want to do. Now, if I want to turn off the passwords, then what I'm going to have to do is come back up to Setup, click on System Configuration. And in this case, if you accidentally turn them on, I suggest you try the word DryFire, all lowercase letters, DRYFIRE, and hit Enter. Once you get into the system configuration, then you can come down and click on Advanced, and then you're going to go back up here to the point which turns them on and off, and you're going to uncheck Enable Shooters Passwords, but it's going to want you to prove that you have the authority to do this by again asking for the administrator password. So this time you're going to need the word DryFire again, all lowercase. And when you hit OK, and you hit OK, and you hit OK, now basically we have turned the passwords off. So let's go prove that we really have. When we go to Setup and click on System Configuration, if it allows us right in, the passwords are not turned on. And we can also go to the second tab and note up here that it is not checkmarked. So hopefully that'll give you an idea as to how to turn the passwords on and turn them off when you want to. And also, if you have accidentally turned on the passwords, how to get yourself out of that situation. Let's talk about the design of the password system. It is a 3-level system. The highest level is the administrator. The second level is the master user. And the third level is the shooter. The shooter may access and modify their shooter's information. However, they cannot change their name or remove their file from the system. The shooter may select any of the layouts for the purpose of shooting. The shooter may create a squad. The shooter may align and pattern his or her gun. The shooter may start a shooting session. And the shooter may print reports. The master user can do anything the shooter can do, but also has the following additional privileges. The master user may access the system configuration dialog screen and make any desired changes with one exception. The master user cannot turn the password system off. The master user may add a new shooter to the system. The administrator has the highest rights and can change anything in the system. Let me explain the reasons for the password system. In its simplest form, it allows any individual home user to protect the dry-fire software from others using the same computer. In its most complex form, it provides the gun club owner the opportunity to allow users to shoot on the dry-fire system without a club staff member present. The password system makes sure that the unattended users cannot make any changes to the system that will adversely affect its operation while maintaining an accurate record of who shot how many targets. Entering a new shooter in the system. Let me set the stage. We're at a local gun club, there's a dry-fire system, and it's password protected. Judy Johnson, a new shooter, would like to get entered into the dry-fire system so she could begin shooting. The question is, who can enter her into this password-controlled system? The answer is the administrator or anyone who has been elevated to master user status. Let's go through this example using the administrator, and I'll play the part of the administrator. So I'm going to start by going up to the little man with the plus sign and left click. Then I'm being asked for my administrator password, which I have typed in, and I click OK. Now that opens up the shooter's details box, and I'm going to start by putting Judy's name in the top, but my recommendation to you is to put it in last name first in order to make it easier in the alphabetized shooters list to find the shooters that you want. So I'm going to type in Johnson, comma, Judy. Then I'm measuring from Judy's eye to the floor, and it's 59 inches. At this time, Judy's handicap average is 22, so I'm going to enter 22 in the yardage area. And then I'm going to ask Judy for a password. So I'm going to have her sit down at the computer and put in her password. In this case, she has put in her password, and then I'm going to go to the next window and ask her to confirm that. And incidentally, the password, it makes a difference whether it's in uppercase or a lowercase letter, or whether it's a number. So be careful that you remember what it is that you put in here for a password. Now, as the administrator, I could at this point click on this shooter is a master, but I choose not to do that. After all, she's just barely getting started with us. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to profile Judy's gun so that when she's ready to shoot, she has a gun to shoot. So I'm going to do that by coming down and clicking on New Shotgun. And then the table that opens, the beginning thing is to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Singles Trap Gun. All right, the next thing is Judy willing to share this with other users or just use it for her personal use? Here are the two choices. I'm going to recommend that she keeps it for her personal use. Now we're going to measure from the bead on her gun to her eyeball. That turns out to be 40.5 inches. It is a 12 gauge. And now we're going to profile the only barrel she has on this gun. And she's telling me that she shoots a full choke, so I'm selecting a full choke. The cartridge area right here does say custom, but that's the only choice, so there's nothing to enter there. I've asked her the velocity of shells that she's using, and they're 1,200 feet per second. The shot weight on her shell is 1 ounce and 1/8, or 32 grams. And the shot size that she typically shoots is a number 8. Now we have all of that information in, and so now I'm asking her what her point of impact is. And she's telling me that her gun at 40 yards shoots 3 inches high. So I'm going to put in 40 yards, and I'm going to come down here under distance above aiming point, select that, and I'm going to put in 3.0. Now, that's all we really need for a single barrel, with the following exception. We want to go to More Settings, and in More Settings up here, first of all, I have a choice of is this an over and under, a side by side, or a single barrel. And Judy's gun is a single barrel, so I'm going to select that. And now the only thing we have to enter here is the distance, the physical distance between the bead on the top of her rib and the center of her barrel. And because basically she has quite a high rib gun, and we've measured it, that distance from the bead on the rib to the center of the bore of her only barrel is 2.1 inches. Now we've answered all of the questions that we need, so we're going to click on OK. And then we're going to come down and click on OK. And now we have entered Judy into the system completely, and so I'm going to click on OK. All right. Now it's time for Judy to want to align her gun. What do we have to do? We're going to go up here and select her as a shooter. Notice that there's a lot of shooters in this particular computer. But if I scroll up here, I find Johnson Judy located here. So I click on that. And now over here to the right under shotgun, it says single trap gun. And because we only gave her one gun to start out with, if I open this window, there's only one choice. So she is now ready to go. Now, let's suppose that Judy wanted to go ahead and make a change to her trap gun and decided here to click on the Edit Shotgun. In the window where it's asking for her password, she types in her password, clicks OK, and we're now into her shotgun details information and could make any change that she wants to make. Perhaps what she's going to do is change from 8s to 7.5s. She clicks on OK, and she's made that change. So what we have here then is a system that protects each and every user. Once they have a unique password, they're the only one who can get in and either change their shooter's information or their shotgun information. Making a shooter a master user. In this example, I'm going to make two shooters within our shooters file, both master users. I'm going to do that by going up to the shooters window and clicking, and then I'm going to select the shooter that I want to make a master. In this case, it's going to be Henry. I now click on Henry. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the pencil, and when the Enter Password dialog box opens, although it says, please enter the password for Henry, I have to enter this password using the administrator password in order to be able to turn this user, this shooter, into a master user. So I'm going to type in the administrator password and not Henry's password. I then end up in the shooter's detail box, and right here, just below the password area, I simply can go ahead and check mark this shooter is a master. And then when I click OK, from that point forward until I come back someday in the future and take that status away from Henry, he will remain a master user and have the rights of a master user. Now let's do that one more time to a different shooter. Let's go ahead and come up to the shooter file, open it up, and let's this time make Judy Johnson a master shooter. So I'll click on Judy Johnson. I then go ahead and click on Edit. And when the password is asked for again, I'm again going to put in the administrator password, not Judy's password. I'll then come along and click on OK. That opens Judy's shooter detail dialog box. I'll simply go to the middle here and check mark this shooter is a master. Once I've done that, I click OK. All right. Now let's suppose it's sometime later and I decide for whatever reason that Henry is no longer going to be a master user. How do I solve that problem? I'll come back up here and open up the shooter window. I'm going to go ahead and select Henry. Then I'm going to select Edit. When the password window opens, again I'm going to type in the administrator password. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And then I'm going to come up here and click on the check mark, and the check mark will go away. And then when I come down and click on OK, Henry is no longer a master user. Now, let me just show you one final thing, and that is, let me now go back to Judy Johnson. But this time, when it asks for a password, let me go ahead and enter Judy's password. And when I click OK, notice that when her shooter's detail box opens, that it is grayed out here in this shooter is a master. So this is the reason then that an individual shooter cannot elevate themselves to the status of a master user, because anytime they enter their shooter's detail dialog box, it's through their password, and when it's through their password, this area is grayed out and that it cannot be changed. So again, just stressing the fact that the administrator of the system is the only one who can make a master user or take a master user back to shooter status. The password target recording feature. I'm starting here in the Advanced Configuration tab, and we have the password system enabled, having it checkmarked. And now if I come down and checkmark this one, which is labeled Maintain Record of Paid For Targets, what it does for me then is will require that everybody who shoots any targets, whether they're a single user or whether they're using the squatting software, they will be required to enter their password before they begin shooting. And by doing that, we have a nice foolproof method whereby we can keep track of shots taken by shooters and know that they really took those shots, so that if it's our desire to charge people for the service of practicing on dry fire, we have absolute credible data, because any time that our system shows that somebody has shot a target, it's because that person has signed in with their password. All right, now let's go from there out here to, after having clicked on Maintain Record of Paid For Targets, this area became bold and I can read Payment Policy, and if I click on that, I now have a payment policy that I can set as the owner of the machine, the administrator. And the first thing is, our payment policy can either be shooters can shoot and then I can collect from them later, or I can force them to prepay for targets before they shoot. If I want them to have to prepay for targets, I'm going to check mark this. And if I'm fine with collecting after the fact, after they've shot the targets, then I will not have this check marked. So the difference in the operation of the system is, if this is check marked, then each time that some particular person decides that they're going to shoot, they will encounter the password. They'll have to put in their personal password, and it will have already checked to see if they have credits in their account, so that they have to have at least 25 credits in order to be able to shoot around. So with this part check marked, then we check to make sure that they prepaid for targets. If they prepaid for as many as 25 targets, we'll let them shoot. If they only have 20 targets in their credit and they're going to shoot around to 25, we're simply going to tell them that they don't have enough credits at this point in time. The second thing down here is, how do we deal with doubles? If we check this, or if we turn this on, we're saying that a pair of doubles can be paid for with 1 credit. So in other words, if you're going to shoot 25 pairs, you need 25 credits. If you select this mode, and this is your machine, so you have your choice. If on the other hand, like is done outdoors, you want to charge for 2 targets when they shoot a pair, then you're going to click this one, and now basically every time they take a shot at a pair, it's basically going to count as 2 clays. So these are your choices. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and say that whether you're shooting a pair or whether you're shooting a single target, I'm going to get you to pay for 1 target. and up here I'm going to remove the check mark. So that is my payment policy, and you can have whatever you want. Click OK. Having chosen Maintain Record of Paid For Targets, I'd now like to take you to the part which shows what this record looks like. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to go back up to Setup. And now on the bottom, we have one that says Shooter Credits, and I'm going to click on that. And now notice here that only the administrator can look at this information. So I'm going to type in the administrator's password. And here's what I see under the Shooter Credits dialog. Notice here that we have a list. If I pull the slider down on the side, it's every shooter that I have in my shooters information table. And every one of the shooters has the same 3 columns of information. Have they purchased any targets? How many targets have they shot, or how many consumed targets have they? And if this is a negative balance, as this one is over here, then Bob could potentially owe the system for 198 targets, or if the owner of this system is not charging for targets, it simply allows him to know how many targets Bob has shot over a long period of time or a short period of time. So again, everybody has the same thing. Now down here you're going to see that this shooter, shooter number 1, has already purchased 25 targets. He's taken 2 targets. He shot 2 targets. That means he has a balance of 23 more targets that he can shoot. And then down here, shooter number 5 has purchased 200 targets, hasn't shot any targets, and has a 200 target balance. All right, now let me go ahead and show you how. Let's take the condition of Bob up here. He owes the club owner for roughly 200 targets. So when Bob pays for 200 targets, then the club owner comes into here, goes into this purchased column, and double clicks in that purchase column to get that 0 highlighted. And then let's say that Bob paid me for 300 targets because he wants to clear up his bill for 198 and he wants to shoot some more targets. So I give him credit over here by putting in 300 targets. And then after using the numeric keypad on my computer to put in 300 targets, the tricky thing here is you have to use your keyboard enter key in order to get that registered. You do not want to come down here and just click on OK, because it will ignore that. So having entered the amount of targets that Bob has purchased, I go to my keyboard and I hit the enter key. Now notice that when I hit the enter key, it immediately changed the balance over here from that Bob owed 198 targets, and now Bob has a balance of 102 targets. So now he can go in and shoot 102 times before it gets back to 0. So that's the simplicity over here of being able to enter when someone purchases targets. Now, if you're clever and want to know a year from now how many targets Bob has shot in total, you will never do the following. You will never highlight him and come down and click on Reset the Account, because if you do that, you lose all of the previous data. So I suggest that the easiest way to keep the records is, as Bob goes on in the year, and then later on, let's suppose that he pays for another couple hundred targets. So I come in here and I change this from 300 to 500. I don't just put in 200, because this number is the absolute number. So I'm going to add 200 to what's already there. So now I'm basically saying Bob is, in the history of dry fire, purchased 500 targets, and when I hit enter, notice over here now it says that he has 302 that he can shoot. So what I'm trying to show you is a way of using this so that you can keep historical records and you can keep a running total, so that a year from now you could look at Bob, Henry, Joe, anybody that is in your system, and know the total number of targets that they shot in a year's time. You'll see the total number that they paid for,
and you'll be able to see their balance. Now, at this point, I'm going to cover the print portion. If I come down here and click on print, it's going to print everything that is in this shooter credit window. So if I come down here and click on print, and now on my computer, it normally wants to go to a printer that's a network printer. But in order for me to show you what this printout looks like, I'm going to go ahead and send it to the PDF creator. And when I do that, basically, you will be able to see the data that would be printed. I have to save this in order to get to the next step. And then in this case, I have to save it to my desktop. And now finally, I'm going to get what I wanted to show you. And it's about right. And now let's take a look at what we've got here. So we start out, it's in the exact same order that you saw when it was in there. We show here that Bob now has 302 targets that he can shoot before he owes the club any money. That Danny owes us for 42 targets. Henry owes us for 35 targets, and so on and so forth. And so if I just pull the scroll bar down the side here, you can see that this goes on, and it moves on and actually does a second page. So if you had 500 people in your system, you would get a printout with as many pages as it takes to hold 500 people. So that's the first thing that I wanted to show you. So very simply, you can go ahead and you can get a printed piece of paper that shows you everything that's been going on in your system. All right, now let me go back to where we were. Now the other thing that you can do is, let's suppose that you only wanted Judy Johnson's information. You can come up here in the filter, and if I type in Johnson, as I start to do that, notice that because there weren't any other Johnsons in the system, it brought it down to one shooter. So I then could pick out any particular shooter that I want, filter it to that person, highlight that person, and click the print button and get a one-page report for that particular person. All right, let me go back and clear out this so that I have everybody. And one final thing would be, if you're a gun club and you're not going to charge your folks for shooting dry fire, but you'd like to have a record of how many targets everybody in the club is shooting on the dry fire, a simple way to do this then would be to do what we've done to this point, which basically turns on the record keeping. And then I would suggest at the end of every month, you simply come into this shooter credit area and go ahead and print the entire list. You're never going to be putting any credits in at this point right here. So every one of these would have a 0 in it because you're not charging. So therefore, if you're not charging, you would never fill this part in. And so looking at this, I'm just kind of cleaning up all of these places where there are targets to show you what it would look like if you were simply using this as keeping track of who shot how many targets. So you would never use the purchased column right here. But as long as you have this feature turned on, dry fire will continue to, every time a shot is taken by Danny, this is incremented by 1. And so at the end of the day, you have a complete list of what everybody did. So you could do such things as clear this out after print it at the end of the month and clear it out and call that the month's report. Or you could just leave all of that information in there, and if I printed it out at the end of the second month, compared that with what was going on at the end of the first month, I would know exactly who used how many targets during a given period. So with that, you can see that there's a lot of possibilities here. And if you'll think your way through this and try some things, I think you'll find that it'll do everything that you want or need it to do. And that brings us to the end of our password discussion. Hope that it has been helpful for you, and we'll talk to you again.